Don't get in the helicopter. The scream didn't just cut through the morning air at Boeing Field. It shattered it like glass against concrete. Michael Harrison froze his hand, already gripping the chrome handle of his pristine Sikorsky S-76. The executive helicopter's rotors were spinning faster now, the turbine whining in preparation for takeoff. Behind him, the sound was deafening. But that voice, young, desperate, terrified, somehow pierced through it all like a knife. He turned sharply. A girl, barefoot and small, no more than 12, was sprinting straight toward him across the private tarmac. Her legs pumped frantically, kicking up dust with each step. Her blue hoodie, once bright, was now faded and torn at the shoulder. The fabric flapped wildly in the rotor wash. Her dark skin glistened with sweat, and her braided hair had come loose, whipping around her face as she ran. Michael stepped back from the aircraft, instinctively raising his arm toward the pilot. "Hold!" he called through his headset. The helicopter's rotors continued their thunderous rotation, but pilot Jack Martinez caught his signal and eased back on the throttle. The turbine began to wind down slightly. The girl was close now, close enough that Michael could see the terror in her wide brown eyes. Terror and something else. Something that looked like the weight of the world pressing down on a child's shoulders. "Stop! Please don't go!" She gasped, breathless. They did something to it. But to understand why those 4 words would change everything, we need to go back. Back to a time when Michael Harrison thought success meant building the biggest company, making the most money, having the most influence. Back to when a 12-year-old girl named Zara Johnson lived in a world where being invisible was a survival skill. 5 years earlier, in a cramped apartment near Boeing Field that smelled like lavender oil and old memories, 6-year-old Zara Johnson sat on her grandmother's lap, staring at a folded American flag in a triangular case. The flag had been handed to her grandmother Ruby just hours before, along with the news that would shatter their small family forever. "Your daddy was a hero, baby girl," Ruby whispered, her voice breaking as she held the flag that had covered Sergeant Marcus Johnson's casket. "He saved 12 soldiers that day, walked right up to that bomb when everyone else was running away. But why did he have to go toward the scary thing, Grandma? Why couldn't he run away too?" Ruby's tears fell onto Zara's hair. "Because that's what heroes do, sweetheart. They run toward danger so other people can run to safety. Your daddy had special eyes, could see trouble coming from miles away. And he had a special heart, one that couldn't let bad things happen to good people." Zara touched the flag gently. "Will I have special eyes too?" "You already do, baby. I see you watching everything, remembering everything. Just like him." What Zara couldn't know, as she sat there, holding her father's flag, was that thousands of miles away, another man was making choices that would destroy his own family. Michael Harrison was in his 20th hour of work that day, building the technology empire that would make him a billionaire. He was also missing his 6-year-old daughter Emma's school play again. "Daddy, you promised you'd come," Emma had whispered into the phone that morning. "I know, sweetheart. Daddy's just really busy with important work. We'll do something special this weekend, okay?" But there would always be more important work. Always another deal, another meeting, another crisis that demanded his attention, more than his daughter's hand-drawn invitation to see her play a sunflower in the spring pageant. By the time Zara turned 12, she had learned to navigate a world that rarely noticed children like her. She and Ruby lived in subsidized housing, where being quiet meant staying safe, where paying attention could mean the difference between eating and going hungry. Ruby worked 3 jobs, cleaning office buildings at night, stocking shelves during the day, and watching neighbors' children when she could. Zara was small for her age, with her father's observant dark eyes and her grandmother's quick wit. She excelled in school, despite changing schools 4 times in 6 years, due to housing instability. Teachers noted her exceptional spatial intelligence and problem-solving abilities, but also her reluctance to speak up in class. At home, though, Zara was different. She kept detailed journals about everything she observed. The patterns of the buses, which neighbors fought on which days, how the weather affected people's moods. She dreamed of becoming an aerospace engineer, spending hours at the library, reading about aircraft design, and watching planes take off from Boeing Field. The irony wasn't lost on her. She lived in the shadow of one of the world's busiest airports, watching million-dollar aircraft daily, while her family struggled to afford bus fare. Every night, Zara wrote letters to her father in a notebook Ruby had given her. She told him about her day, her dreams, her fears. Dear Daddy, tonight's letter began. I saw something today that didn't feel right. I don't know what to do about it. I wish you were here to tell me. I promise I'm trying to be brave like you. Meanwhile, Michael Harrison had built Harrison Tech Industries into a billion-dollar empire specializing in artificial intelligence applications for healthcare and aviation. His latest breakthrough, an AI-powered collision avoidance system for aircraft, was about to secure the largest military contract in the company's history. But success had come at a devastating price. 2 years earlier, his wife Lisa had packed her bags and taken 8-year-old Emma to California. "You've built an empire," she had said that final night, standing in the doorway of their bedroom with tears streaming down her face. "But you've forgotten how to build a family. When's the last time you actually listened to Emma, to me? When's the last time you looked at us? Really looked at us instead of looking through us to whatever's next on your schedule?" The divorce papers had arrived while he was in a board meeting discussing quarterly projections. He'd signed them between reviewing budget forecasts and approving a new product launch. Even his lawyer had seemed disturbed by how mechanically he'd handled the end of his marriage. Now, Michael lived alone in a minimalist penthouse, surrounded by awards and achievements that felt increasingly hollow. He worked 18-hour days, traveled constantly, and made decisions that affected thousands of lives. But he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a real conversation with another human being. Couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him and seen a person instead of a paycheck. His morning routine was precise: up at 5 a.m., workout, protein shake review, market reports, conference calls with international teams. Everything in his life was scheduled, optimized, and controlled. He had systems for everything, backup plans for his backup plans. He prided himself on seeing the big picture, while others got lost in details. But Michael Harrison, for all his intelligence and success, had developed one critical flaw. He had stopped listening to small voices. He had trained himself to focus only on the loudest, most important-sounding people in the room. He paid attention to stock prices and board members and government officials. He had forgotten how to hear the things that mattered most. The night before everything changed, Zara couldn't sleep. The apartment felt smaller than usual, filled with the sounds of Ruby's exhausted snoring and the neighbor's television bleeding through the walls. She slipped out of bed, grabbed her jacket, and quietly unlocked the front door. Walking at night wasn't safe. But Zara had mapped every shadow, every hiding spot, every escape route in their neighborhood. She moved like a ghost through the chain-link fence surrounding Boeing Field's private aviation section, following a hole she'd discovered months ago behind a rusted dumpster. The private hangars were different from the commercial terminals. Quieter, more exclusive, where rich people kept their personal aircraft. Zara often came here to think, to watch the occasional late-night departure, to dream about the day she might work on these machines, instead of just observing them from the outside. Tonight felt different. 2 men in dark clothing stood beside a sleek helicopter she'd never seen before, a gray and white Sikorsky S-76 with Harrison Tech painted in silver letters along the fuselage. The men moved with purpose, not like mechanics or pilots. One was tall and broad-shouldered. The other was shorter, but moved with military precision. Zara crouched behind a fuel truck, heart pounding. The taller man, she could see a scar across his neck in the hangar's fluorescent lighting, was saying something in a low voice, while the shorter one worked underneath the aircraft with a small flashlight. By 9 a.m. tomorrow, she caught fragments of their conversation carried by the wind. GPS system, 8 minutes into the flight. The shorter man emerged from beneath the helicopter, holding a small black device about the size of a smartphone. "This'll do it," he said, his voice clearer now. "Signal jammer with a delayed activation. He'll lose navigation and communication simultaneously. By the time they realize what's happening, they'll be too far out over the sound." And then the taller man asked, "Then we collect our payment from Morrison. Titan Defense gets the contract. Everyone wins. Except Harrison. Harrison was never supposed to live through tomorrow anyway." Zara's blood ran cold. They were talking about killing someone. The helicopter belonged to Harrison Tech. She'd seen the logo on buildings downtown. This was about murdering whoever was supposed to fly this helicopter in the morning. She fumbled for her phone to record them, but her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. By the time she managed to open the camera app, the men were walking away, their conversation lost to distance. The shorter man pulled off black leather gloves and checked his watch. "Project Falcon is a go," he said into a phone. "Tomorrow at 9, Michael Harrison becomes yesterday's news." Zara watched them disappear into the shadows between hangars, then waited another 20 minutes before moving. She approached the helicopter, carefully looking for whatever they had installed. Under the co-pilot section, she could see a small black device that definitely hadn't been there during her previous visits. She'd memorized every detail of every aircraft in this hangar. She pulled out her journal and sketched everything. The men's approximate heights and builds. The device's location, the conversation fragments she remembered. Her father had taught her through Ruby's stories that details mattered, that paying attention could save lives. But who would believe a 12-year-old girl from the projects? Who would listen to someone like her when she tried to warn someone like Michael Harrison? As she walked home through the pre-dawn darkness, Zara made a decision that terrified her. Tomorrow morning she would find a way to stop a murder, even if it meant screaming at a stranger who would probably think she was crazy. Sometimes being brave meant being willing to look foolish. Her father would have understood. The next morning dawned clear and perfect for flying. At Boeing Field, Michael Harrison's morning had proceeded exactly according to schedule. Breakfast at 6 a.m., steel-cut oats with blueberries and protein powder. Market review at 6:30. Conference call with the Tokyo office at 7 Nizuru's. Arrival at Boeing Field at 8:15, where his pilot Jack Martinez and security team were conducting the final pre-flight inspection. Today's destination, Vancouver, British Columbia. Today's mission sign, the largest defense contract in Harrison Tech's history. David Sterling, CEO of Titan Defense Systems, had been courting this deal for 18 months. The Canadian meeting was the final formality before the signing ceremony next week in Washington, D.C. Michael felt good about the numbers. Harrison Tech's AI collision avoidance system was superior to anything Titan could offer. The military trials had been flawless. The safety ratings were unprecedented. This contract would not only secure his company's future, but revolutionize aviation safety worldwide. His security detail, Marcus Thompson and Victor Kane, flanked him as he approached the helicopter. Thompson, the senior guard, was ex-military with an exemplary record. Kane, his partner, had come highly recommended from a private security firm. Both men had been with Harrison Tech for 8 months, and Michael trusted them completely. Weather's perfect, Mr. Harrison Jack Martinez called out from the pilot's seat. "Clear skies all the way to Vancouver. We'll have you there by 10:30. Michael nodded, checking his phone one last time. 3 missed calls from Emma in California, unusual for a school day. He made a mental note to call her back after the meeting. Maybe they could talk about her science project. though he'd probably forgotten what it was about. Again. Thompson held the helicopter door open. "Ready when you are, sir." Michael stepped forward, his mind already focused on the presentation he'd give in Vancouver, the key points he needed to emphasize the questions Sterling might ask. He had contingency plans for every possible objection, financial projections that would make the decision obvious. He gripped the door handle, placed one foot on the step, and was about to climb inside when the scream split the morning air. "Don't get in the helicopter." The girl couldn't have been more than 90 pounds soaking wet, but she skidded to a stop 20 feet away, with the authority of someone carrying life-or-death information. Her chest heaved as she gasped for breath, her brown eyes darting between Michael and the helicopter. "Stop!" she panted. "Please don't go." They did something to it. Marcus Thompson stepped forward immediately, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "Sir, step away from the aircraft. I'll handle this." But Michael raised his palm. Something about the girl's desperation felt genuine. In his experience, crazy people ranted, scammers performed. This girl looked genuinely terrified. And there was something else, something in her eyes that reminded him of Emma. The way his daughter looked when she was trying to explain something important that adults weren't understanding. "Slow down," Michael said, stepping toward her. "Who are you talking about?" She pointed directly past him, her finger trembling. Michael turned to follow her gaze. Thompson and Kane stood exactly where they'd been for the past 10 minutes, silent, professional, alert, behind their dark sunglasses. "I saw them," she said, her voice cracking. "Or two guys just like them. Same build, same suits. Last night near the fence, they opened something underneath the chopper and put a black box inside. I swear I saw it." Kane shifted his weight slightly. Thompson's expression remained unreadable behind his shades. Sir Thompson said calmly, "We've been with you all morning. You know that." Michael looked back at the girl. She was still breathing hard, but she hadn't moved. She wasn't begging or crying or trying to get closer. She was just standing there watching the helicopter like it might explode. "What's your name?" Michael asked quietly. "Zara," she whispered. "Zara Johnson." Her voice broke slightly on her last name, but she didn't cry. There was something about her stillness, her precision, that reminded Michael not just of Emma, but of himself at that age. The careful observation, the attention to detail that had made him successful in engineering before it had made him rich in business. Michael glanced between Zara the helicopter and his security team. Something felt wrong. It wasn't the girl's tears, she wasn't even crying. It wasn't her story people made up crazier things for attention all the time. It was the specificity of her fear, the detail, the way she stood there like a small soldier delivering a critical intelligence report. "You saw them touch the helicopter?" Michael asked. She nodded, pulling out a small notebook from her hoodie pocket. "Two men around 11:45 last night. The tall one had a scar across his neck and wore black gloves. The shorter one did the work while the tall one kept watch. Thompson touched his neck unconsciously, a gesture so quick that Michael almost missed it. The scar was there, usually hidden by his shirt collar. A detail that someone couldn't have known unless they'd seen him up close. They talked about GPS system failure 8 minutes into flight. Zara continued reading from her notes. Something about a signal jammer with delayed activation. They mentioned someone named Morrison and Titan Defense. Kane stepped forward. "Sir, this is clearly some kind of... They said you'd lose navigation and communication over the sound." Zara interrupted, her voice stronger now. "That by the time you realized what was happening, you'd be too far out for rescue." The detail hit Michael like ice water. The flight plan to Vancouver took them directly over Puget Sound. 8 minutes into the flight would put them exactly over the deepest part of the sound, 40 miles from shore. Curtis Michael barked into his phone, reaching his head of maintenance. I need a full diagnostic sweep on tail number N1140. Focus on the undercarriage and navigation systems. Sir. Now Michael looked back at Zara Johnson. Her dark eyes held his steadily. Now. Curtis Williams arrived within 12 minutes, bringing 2 senior technicians and a mobile diagnostic unit. Michael had worked with Curtis for 7 years. The man was thorough skeptical and completely immune to corporate politics. If there was something wrong with the aircraft, Curtis would find it. Talk me through what you saw, Michael said to Zara, while Curtis's team began their inspection. Zara's notebook was worn and filled with careful handwriting, the same notebook she used to write letters to her father, though Michael didn't know that yet. 2 men, she began, her voice steady despite everything. The tall one had a scar across his neck and wore black gloves. The shorter one did the work while the tall one kept watch. Thompson touched his neck again unconsciously. Kane's face had gone pale. They talked about Project Falcon. Zara continued. One of them said, "After he's dead, we'll be rich." They said something about Morrison paying them. Michael felt pieces clicking into place. Morrison. Alex Morrison, Vice President of Strategic Development at Titan Defense. They'd competed against each other for several contracts over the years. Morrison was ambitious, ruthless, but Michael had never imagined he'd resort to murder. Mr. Harrison, Curtis called from beneath the helicopter. "I need you to see this." Michael walked over Zara, following despite Thompson's attempt to intercept her. Curtis was kneeling under the co-pilot section, pointing a flashlight at a small black device attached to the navigation console's underside. "This wasn't here yesterday," Curtis said grimly. "I supervised the full maintenance check myself. This is a GPS jammer, military grade. Sophisticated piece of equipment." Michael felt his stomach drop. What would it do? Exactly what she described. Delayed activation, probably triggered by altitude or flight time. Once active, it would block all GPS signals and interfere with radio communication. You'd lose navigation and be unable to call for help. Thompson and Kane remained silent, but Michael could see sweat beading on Kane's forehead despite the cool morning air. "How long has your security team had access to this aircraft?" Curtis asked. 8 months. Michael replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Since they were hired." Zara stepped closer, her journal still open. The shorter man said, "Project Falcon is a go. They talked about collecting payment after you were dead." Michael turned to face Thompson and Kane. Both men stood perfectly still, but their body language had changed. Thompson's hand rested on his weapon. Kane's eyes darted toward the hangar exit. "Gentlemen," Michael said quietly, "I think we need to have a conversation." Danny Michael called to his head of security through his phone. "I need the surveillance footage from Hangar 7 last night, between 11 p.m. and midnight. Immediately." Danny Rodriguez arrived 15 minutes later with a laptop and a grim expression. "Mr. Harrison, we have a problem. The footage from 11:43 p.m. to 12:10 a.m. is completely missing." "Equipment malfunction?" Michael asked, though he already knew the answer. "No, sir. This was a manual deletion. Someone with administrative access wiped 27 minutes of video and inserted a loop of empty hangar footage." Michael felt the pieces clicking into place. "Who has administrative access to the security system?" "You, me, and anyone with level 9 clearance," Danny replied. "That includes your senior security detail." Thompson finally spoke. "Sir, I understand how this looks, but—" "How it looks," Michael interrupted, "is that someone with access to our security systems, our aircraft, and detailed knowledge of my flight schedule tried to murder me. And the only reason I'm still alive is because a 12-year-old girl had the courage to speak up." Zara stood quietly beside Curtis, still clutching her notebook. Her presence seemed to make Thompson and Kane increasingly uncomfortable. There was something about her stillness, her careful attention to everything around her, that made grown men nervous. The device Curtis announced, holding up the black jammer. It's got a serial number. We can trace this. Kane broke first. Look, Harrison, things aren't what they seem. You don't understand the bigger picture here. Then explain it to me, Michael said. Titan Defense offered us a job, a real job. Not babysitting some tech billionaire, but actual security work. Good money, benefits, retirement. And all you had to do was kill me. Thompson stepped forward. It wasn't supposed to be murder. Just an accident. A tragic malfunction that would delay your contract signing long enough for Titan to present a better offer. Except Michael said, his voice, cold aircraft accidents over open water tend to be fatal. That wasn't our concern, Kane said. We were paid to create an opportunity. What happened after that was out of our hands. Michael looked at Zara, who had been quietly listening to everything. The way she stood there absorbing every word reminded him of something his engineering professors used to say. The best engineers are the ones who pay attention to details that everyone else thinks are unimportant. What do you think he asked her? She looked up at him with those steady dark eyes. I think they're scared. And scared people make more mistakes. Michael pulled out his phone. Danny, call the FBI. I want these men arrested for attempted murder and corporate espionage. Sir Thompson said you're making a mistake. Titan Defense has resources you can't imagine. They won't stop with us. Within 2 hours, FBI Special Agent Patricia Martinez was interviewing Thompson and Kane in separate rooms, while Michael, Zara, and Curtis waited in Harrison Tech's corporate security office. The building, normally buzzing with activity, felt eerily quiet. Mr. Harrison. Agent Martinez said, emerging from the interrogation rooms, your security team has provided some very interesting information about Titan Defense Systems and a man named Alex Morrison. Michael knew Morrison, Titan's vice president of strategic development. They'd competed against each other for several contracts over the years. Morrison was ambitious, ruthless, but Michael had never imagined he'd resort to murder. Morrison apparently reached out to Thompson 3 months ago. Martinez continued. Offered them $500,000 each to ensure your upcoming contract signing was delayed indefinitely. They claim they thought it was just corporate sabotage, not attempted murder. Do you believe them? Michael asked. It doesn't matter what I believe. What matters is that we now have evidence of a larger conspiracy. Thompson provided Morrison's contact information, financial records, showing payments from a shell company linked to Titan, and recordings of their conversations. Zara, who had been quietly drawing in her notebook, looked up. What about the other pilots? If they did this to Mr. Harrison, they might try it again with someone else. Agent Martinez smiled. That's very good thinking. We're already checking other aircraft owned by Harrison Tech's competitors. This may not have been their first attempt. Michael felt a chill. How many other accidents had Morrison orchestrated? How many competitors had died in convenient malfunctions? There's something else, Martinez said. Morrison's phone records show multiple calls to David Sterling, Titan's CEO. This goes all the way to the top. The implications hit Michael like a physical blow. Titan Defense wasn't just trying to win a contract. They were systematically eliminating competition through murder. We need to move fast, Martinez continued. Morrison doesn't know his hired killers have been arrested yet. We want to keep it that way while we gather more evidence. What do you need from me? Michael asked. Nothing. You've done enough by staying alive. Martinez turned to Zara. Young lady, what you did took incredible courage. You probably saved not just Mr. Harrison's life, but the lives of other potential victims. Zara looked down at her notebook. I just did what my daddy would have done. He always said that good people have to speak up when they see bad things happening. Michael felt something twist in his chest. Here was a 12-year-old girl who understood moral courage better than most adults he knew. While he'd been focused on profit margins and market share, she'd been watching, paying attention to details that could save lives. "Zara," he said, "where do you live? Are you safe with my grandma?" "Ruby in the Riverside housing complex," she replied. "It's not fancy, but we look out for each other." Michael made a decision that would change everything. "Agent Martinez, if Morrison and his people are willing to kill for this contract, they might target anyone who can connect them to the crime. That includes Zara. We can provide protection." "No," Michael interrupted. "I can provide better protection. Zara, would you and your grandmother be willing to stay somewhere safe until this is over? As my guests?" Zara's eyes widened. "You mean like a hotel?" "I mean like my house," Michael said. "I have more security than the FBI, and I owe you my life. It's the least I can do." For the first time since he'd met her, Zara Johnson smiled. Michael's estate in Bellevue sat on 15 acres of landscaped grounds, surrounded by a security perimeter that most government facilities would envy. As their armored SUV passed through the main gate, Zara pressed her face to the window in wonder. "This is where you live?" she asked. "Just me," Michael replied, and for the first time, the admission embarrassed him. The house was 12,000 square feet, 5 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, a home, theater, wine cellar, and pool. It was designed to impress business associates and intimidate competitors. It had never been designed as a home. Ruby Johnson, Zara's grandmother, sat quietly in the passenger seat. She was a small woman with gray hair and intelligent eyes that reminded Michael of her granddaughter. She'd asked few questions when Agent Martinez had explained the situation, simply packed a small bag, and hugged her neighbors goodbye. "Mr. Harrison," Ruby said, as they pulled into the circular driveway, "I need you to understand something. Zara and I aren't charity cases. We pay our own way." "Mrs. Johnson," Michael replied, "your granddaughter saved my life. You raised her to be brave enough to speak up when it mattered. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering gratitude." Inside the house, Zara moved carefully, as if afraid to touch anything. The living room was all glass and steel modern art on the walls, furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable. It was the opposite of everything warm and lived in. "Are you hungry?" Michael asked, realizing he had no idea what 12-year-olds like to eat. "We packed sandwiches," Ruby said diplomatically. Michael felt awkward in his own house. He'd designed it to project success, but now it just felt cold and empty. "There's a library upstairs," he offered to Zara, "and a computer with internet access." Zara's eyes lit up. "Really high-speed internet, the fastest money can buy." For the first time, she looked genuinely excited. "I've been trying to research aerospace engineering programs, but the library computers are slow, and we can only afford basic internet at home." Michael felt another pang of guilt. He spent more on monthly internet service than Ruby probably made in a week. "Zara," he said, "while you're here, use whatever you need. Research whatever interests you. Consider it payment for saving my life." That evening, as rain pattered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Michael's living room, Ruby Johnson sat in an armchair that probably cost more than her annual rent and told him about her granddaughter's father. Her voice carried the weight of memories too painful to bear alone, but too precious to forget. "Marcus was different from the day he was born," Ruby said. Her hands wrapped around a cup of tea Michael had somehow managed to prepare. Always watching, always thinking. When other kids were playing, he was studying how things worked. Taking apart radios, watching birds, memorizing the patterns of airplanes overhead. Zara sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, sketching in her notebook, while listening to her grandmother's stories. She'd heard them before, but they never got old. They were the foundation of who she was, the reminder that she came from someone brave and good. He joined the Army right out of high school, Ruby continued. Said he wanted to serve his country, but I think he really wanted to work with helicopters. He was a crew chief on a Black Hawk in Afghanistan. His commanding officer said Marcus could spot trouble from 5 miles away, saved his unit more times than anyone could count. Michael found himself leaning forward, genuinely interested. How did he die, IED on a supply run? Ruby said quietly. Marcus saw the suspicious pile of debris by the roadside and radioed for the convoy to stop. He went forward alone to investigate. The bomb was bigger than anyone expected. She paused, her voice breaking slightly. He saved 12 lives that day. Cost him his own. Zara looked up from her drawing. Mama couldn't handle it after Daddy died. She started using drugs to stop feeling sad, but they made her feel nothing instead of sad. And then she couldn't stop. The matter-of-fact way Zara described her mother's addiction broke Michael's heart. This child had faced more loss and abandonment in her 12 years than most adults experienced in a lifetime. And yet, here she was, still brave enough to run toward danger to save a stranger. Keisha was a good girl, Ruby added. Smart, funny, full of dreams. But grief does things to people, changes them. She's been in and out of rehab 3 times. Each time she gets clean, she promises to come home, to be Zara's mama again. But then something triggers her and she disappears. Zara finished. It's okay though. Grandma Ruby is better than most mamas anyway. Ruby reached over and squeezed her granddaughter's hand. This child has never had a real childhood. Always taking care of me when I'm tired from work. Always watching out for the neighbors. Always studying to make something better of herself. Michael thought about his own daughter, Emma, safe in her private school in California, worried about homework and friend drama. Normal 12-year-old problems. The contrast made him feel ashamed of how little he appreciated his own advantages. Why aerospace engineering? Michael asked Zara. She held up her sketch, a detailed drawing of his helicopter, with annotations about rotor dynamics and engine specifications. Because airplanes connect people. They take families to see each other, bring supplies to places that need help, rescue people from danger. If I understand how they work, maybe I can make them safer better. And because of your father, Zara nodded. Daddy loved helicopters. Grandma says he would have become a pilot if he'd had the chance to go to college. So maybe I can do what he would have done. Michael studied her drawings. The technical details were remarkably accurate for someone who'd never had formal training. She'd clearly spent countless hours observing aircraft, reading everything she could find, teaching herself the fundamentals of aerodynamics. Zara, he said carefully, what if I told you that after this is all over, you could have those chances your father never got? College, engineering school, whatever you want to study. She looked up at him with those serious dark eyes. I'd say that sounds too good to be true. And Grandma taught me that when something sounds too good to be true, there's usually a catch. Ruby laughed. Smart girl. But Mr. Harrison, she's also taught me that sometimes good things happen to good people, and we have to be brave enough to accept them. There's no catch, Michael said. I owe you my life. But more than that, I think you and your grandmother are exactly the kind of people the world needs more of. People who pay attention, who speak up, who take care of each other. Zara went back to her drawing. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you have a family? Kids? Michael felt the familiar ache. I have a daughter, Emma. She's 8. She lives with her mother in California. Why doesn't she live with you? The simple question hit harder than any corporate boardroom confrontation. Because I wasn't very good at being a father. I was always working, always focused on business. I forgot how to listen to the people who mattered most. Zara looked up again. It's not too late to learn. Later that night, after Ruby and Zara had settled into the guest rooms, Michael sat alone in his study and did something he hadn't done in months. He called his daughter. Daddy. Emma's voice was sleepy. It was past her bedtime in California. Hey, sweetheart. I'm sorry to call so late. I just wanted to hear your voice. Mommy said you might be busy for a while. Something about work. Michael closed his eyes. Even now, Lisa was protecting him, making excuses for his absence. Emma, can I tell you about something that happened to me today? Okay. Michael found himself describing Zara. Her courage, her intelligence, her determination to speak up even when no one might believe her. As he talked, he realized he was really talking about the kind of person he wanted Emma to become. She sounds brave, Emma said. Like the girls in my books. She is brave. And you know what? She reminded me of you. Really, really. Remember last month when you tried to tell me about Tommy Morrison bullying kids at school, and I was too busy checking emails to really listen? Emma was quiet for a moment. You said you'd handle it later. I did. And I never followed up, did I? No. Michael felt the weight of that admission. Emma, I'm sorry. I've been a terrible father. I've been so focused on work, on making money, on being successful, that I forgot the most important job I have is being your dad. Daddy, are you okay? You sound different. I'm okay. But I want to be better. I want to be the kind of father who listens when you have something important to tell me. The kind who pays attention to the details of your life, not just the big events. Can you come visit soon? How about next weekend? We could do whatever you want. No work calls, no meetings. Just us. Really. Even if it's something boring like going to the butterfly garden. Michael smiled. Especially if it's the butterfly garden. After he hung up, Michael walked through his empty house and tried to see it through Zara's eyes. The awards on the walls, the expensive furniture, the pristine kitchen that he never used. It all felt hollow. He'd built a monument to his own success, but he'd forgotten to build a life. His marriage to Lisa had started with such hope. They'd met in college, both of them engineering students with big dreams. Lisa had been the brilliant one. She'd actually finished her aerospace engineering degree, while Michael had dropped out junior year to start his first company. You're going to change the world, she'd told him on their wedding day. Just don't forget to come home and tell me about it. For the first few years they'd work on projects together in their garage startup dream about the future plan for the family they wanted to build. But as the company grew, as the demands increased, as the opportunities multiplied, Michael had gradually stopped coming home. Not physically, but emotionally. Lisa had tried to compete with his work for his attention and lost. She'd tried to support his ambitions while building her own career and raising Emma. She'd tried to make him understand what he was missing. Emma's first words, her first steps, school plays, parent-teacher conferences, bedtime stories. I feel like I'm married to a ghost, Lisa had said during one of their last real conversations. You're physically present, but mentally gone. Emma asks me why Daddy doesn't want to play with her. I'm doing this for our family. He'd replied the same excuse he'd used 100 times. No, Michael. You're doing this for your ego. Our family needs you, not your money. The divorce had been civil, even friendly. Lisa had been generous with custody arrangements, never tried to turn Emma against him. She'd simply accepted that Michael wasn't capable of being the husband and father they needed him to be. Now, sitting in his study, surrounded by the evidence of his professional success, Michael wondered what his life would have looked like if he'd made different choices. If he'd learned to listen to small voices instead of just loud ones. If he'd paid attention to details instead of just big picture strategies. Zara Johnson had saved his life today, but she'd also shown him something else. It wasn't too late to change. It wasn't too late to learn how to listen, how to pay attention, how to be present for the people who mattered. Tomorrow, he would start becoming the kind of man who deserved the second chance she'd given him. The next morning, Michael found Zara in his study at 6 a.m., surrounded by open books about aircraft design and aerodynamics. She'd clearly been up for hours taking detailed notes in her careful handwriting. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "I sleep better when I'm learning something," she replied without looking up from a technical manual about helicopter rotor systems. "Your library is amazing. I've never seen so many engineering books in one place." Michael looked at the shelves that lined his study walls. Most of the books were gifts from business associates or had been purchased by his decorator to convey intellectual authority. He'd never actually read most of them. "What are you working on?" Zara turned her notebook toward him. She'd been analyzing the sabotage attempt, mapping out how the GPS jammer would have affected his helicopter's systems. Her diagrams were remarkably sophisticated. "I wanted to understand exactly what would have happened," she said. "The device they planted would have caused a cascade failure. First, you'd lose GPS navigation. Then, as the pilot tried to switch to backup systems, the jammer would interfere with radio communication. By the time you realized you were in trouble, you'd be lost over open water with no way to call for help." Michael studied her analysis. "How do you know all this?" "I read everything I can find about aviation safety. After Daddy died, I wanted to understand how aircraft work, how they fail, how to make them safer." She looked up at him. "I never want another family to lose someone the way we lost him." The simple statement carried such weight, such purpose. At 12, Zara had already found her calling, to prevent the kind of loss that had devastated her own family. "Zara," Michael said, "I want to show you something." He led her to his computer and pulled up the Harrison Tech Engineering Archives. Thousands of technical documents, design specifications, and safety protocols that most people would never have access to. "This is our collision avoidance system," he said, opening the files for Project Guardian. "It uses AI to predict potential aircraft conflicts and automatically adjusts flight paths to prevent collisions." Zara's eyes widened as she studied the technical specifications. "This is incredible. With this system, pilots would never have to worry about mid-air collisions." "That's the idea. But it's only the beginning. The military contract we're competing for would fund development of even more advanced safety systems. The contract that Morrison tried to kill you for. Yes. But Zara, this technology could save thousands of lives. That's why it was worth trying to murder me for. Not just the money, but control over the future of aviation safety." Zara was quiet for a long moment, studying the technical drawings. "May I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do you do this? The engineering, the business, all of it." Michael had been asked that question in countless interviews, and he'd always given the same practiced answer about innovation and market opportunities. But looking at Zara's serious face, he found himself telling the truth. "I used to think it was about proving I was smart enough, successful enough, important enough. But today, watching you study these systems, seeing how much you care about making things safer." He paused. "I think maybe I do it for the same reason you want to become an engineer, to solve problems that matter." Ruby appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray with breakfast for all three of them. "Good morning. I hope you don't mind. I borrowed your kitchen." The smell of fresh coffee and homemade biscuits filled the study. Michael couldn't remember the last time his house had smelled like cooking food. "Mrs. Johnson, you didn't need to." "Child," Ruby interrupted with a smile, "I've been cooking breakfast for 70 years. I'm not about to stop now just because I'm in a fancy house." As they ate together, Ruby in the chair beside his desk, Zara cross-legged on the floor, Michael perched on the edge of his reading chair. He realized this was the first real family meal he'd had in his own home since his divorce. "Mr. Harrison," Zara said between bites, "after we solved this Morrison problem, Would you teach me more about AI systems? I'd be honored to, Michael replied. But only if you call me Michael. She grinned. Deal, Michael. But their peaceful morning was about to be shattered. Agent Martinez's voice came through Michael's secure phone with news that made his blood run cold. Thompson and Kane made bail, she said without preamble. Their lawyer argued they were merely following orders and posed no flight risk. They were released an hour ago. Michael felt ice in his veins. How is that possible? They tried to murder me. Their lawyer claims it was corporate espionage, not attempted murder. Says they believed the GPS jammer would only cause navigational confusion, not a fatal crash. The judge bought it. What about Morrison still in custody in the Caymans fighting extradition? But Michael, there's something else. Thompson's cell phone pinged a tower near your neighborhood 20 minutes ago. Michael walked to the window of his study, scanning the tree line that surrounded his property. His security system was sophisticated, but Thompson and Kane knew its weaknesses. They'd helped design the protocols. I'm moving Zara and Ruby to a more secure location, Michael said. We can arrange federal protection. No. These men know how federal protection works. They know the procedures, the safe houses, the communication protocols. I'm taking them somewhere Thompson and Kane can't predict. Agent Martinez was quiet for a moment. Where Harrison Tech headquarters. The building has military-grade security, and it's the last place they'd expect me to hide the people they're trying to eliminate. Within an hour, Michael, Zara, and Ruby were in an armored SUV heading toward downtown Seattle. Michael's head of security, Danny Rodriguez, had cleared the route and stationed additional guards at the corporate headquarters. But as they approached the building, Danny's voice crackled through the radio with words that made Michael's heart stop. Sir, we have a problem. Building surveillance shows two men matching Thompson and Kane's descriptions, entering through the parking garage 15 minutes ago. How did they get access? Michael demanded. Emergency override codes. They still have administrative clearance in the system. Then we don't go up, Michael said. Change of plans. Take us to the private helipad on the roof of the Westin Hotel. We'll use my backup helicopter. But as their SUV changed direction, another vehicle rammed into them from the side. A black pickup truck that sent them spinning across 3 lanes of traffic. Michael's driver fought for control as Danny shouted into his radio for backup. Thompson emerged from the pickup's passenger seat with a military-grade rifle. He fired 3 shots into their engine block, disabling the SUV as it rolled to a stop against a concrete barrier. Everyone out, Kane shouted, approaching with a handgun drawn. Slowly. Ruby instinctively moved to shield Zara, but the girl stepped forward with the same calm courage she'd shown at the airport. You don't want to hurt us, she said to Thompson. We're not the ones who can send you to prison. Smart kid, Thompson replied. But you're the ones who can testify against us. Make this disappear and everyone goes home happy. Except Michael, Zara said. Kane smiled coldly. Accidents happen, especially to billionaires who think they're untouchable. Michael stepped out of the SUV, hands raised. Let them go. This is between us. No, Thompson said. It's between us and anyone who can connect us to Morrison. That includes your little guardian angel here. But Zara had been studying their position, just as her father had taught her through Ruby's stories. They were on a busy downtown street in broad daylight. Traffic was backing up. Pedestrians were starting to notice the armed men and disabled vehicles. You made a mistake, she told Thompson quietly. What mistake? You chose a public place for a private crime. Look around. Thompson glanced up and saw what Zara had already noticed. Security cameras on every corner, cell phones recording from stopped cars. News helicopters circling overhead after picking up police scanner reports of the crash. This is already on live television, Zara continued. Everyone in Seattle is watching you decide whether to become a killer or turn yourself in. Kane's hand tightened on his weapon. We're already killers, little girl. No, she said firmly. You're saboteurs. You planted a device to cause an accident. That's different from pointing a gun at a child on camera. That's the kind of thing that makes you famous for all the wrong reasons. Michael realized what Zara was doing, giving Thompson and Kane a chance to choose differently, to step back from a line they couldn't uncross. She was offering them the same thing she'd offered him. A moment of clarity, a chance to see the consequences before it was too late. Thompson lowered his rifle slightly. Kid's got a point, Victor. This has gone too far. But Kane was past listening. We finish this now, or we spend the rest of our lives in prison. He raised his gun toward Zara, and everything changed. Danny Rodriguez, who had been quietly calling for backup while the conversation unfolded, suddenly gunned his damaged SUV forward, ramming into Kane and sending him sprawling. The weapon flew from his hands, skittering across the asphalt. Run, Danny shouted. Federal Building, 2 blocks north. Michael grabbed Ruby's hand, while Zara sprinted ahead with the speed and agility of someone who'd spent her life navigating dangerous neighborhoods. Thompson, recovering from his surprise, fired 2 shots that shattered the SUV's rear window, but missed the fleeing group. Behind them, Kane retrieved his weapon, and both men gave chase on foot, moving with military precision, using parked cars for cover, communicating with hand signals as they pursued their targets through the crowded downtown streets. Zara reached the corner first and looked back to see Ruby struggling to keep up. Without hesitation, she ran back, taking her grandmother's arm and helping her navigate the uneven sidewalk. This way, she called to Michael, leading them through a narrow alley between 2 office buildings. I know these streets. Michael realized that Zara's knowledge of Seattle's urban landscape was far more detailed than his own. She'd spent years walking these streets with Ruby, learning every shortcut, every hiding place, every route between bus stops and shelter locations. They emerged from the alley onto Pine Street, where the weekend farmers market was in full swing. Hundreds of people browsed vendor stalls, selling fresh produce, handmade crafts, and prepared foods. The crowd provided cover, but it also created chaos. Stay together, Michael said, but the crowd immediately separated them. Ruby was swept toward a vegetable stand. Michael found himself blocked by a group of tourists, and Zara was carried forward by the flow of people toward the street performers near Pike Place Market. Thompson and Kane emerged from the alley seconds later, scanning the crowd for their targets. Kane spotted Ruby first, her gray hair visible near the produce vendors. He moved toward her, weapon concealed under his jacket. But Zara saw him coming. She pushed through the crowd, reached a street musician's amplifier, and grabbed the microphone. "Everyone get down!" she shouted, her voice booming across the market. Armed men in black jackets. Call 911. The crowd reacted with a mixture of panic and confusion. Some people dropped to the ground. Others ran in all directions. Vendors abandoned their stalls. The organized flow of the market became instant chaos. Kane lost sight of Ruby in the stampede. Thompson, trying to reach Zara, found himself fighting against a tide of fleeing people. The street musician, a young man with quick reflexes, tackled Thompson from behind when he saw the rifle. Federal Building, Zara called to Michael and Ruby, pointing north toward the imposing glass structure that housed the FBI's Seattle office. We'll be safe there. But their path was blocked by the panicking crowd. People were running in all directions. Parents grabbing children, vendors trying to protect their merchandise. The Seattle police were already responding to reports of armed men, but they were blocks away. Michael spotted Ruby near an overturned fruit stand and fought his way toward her. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. But where's Zara?" They looked around frantically and saw her near the street performers' setup, helping an elderly man who'd fallen during the stampede. Even in the middle of their own crisis, she was taking care of others. Kane had recovered and was moving through the crowd towards Zara, using the chaos as cover. He was 20 feet away when Michael saw him. "Zara," Michael shouted. "Behind you." She turned and saw Kane raising his weapon. Without thinking, she grabbed the street musician's guitar case and swung it like a shield, deflecting Kane's first shot. The bullet ricocheted off the metal corner of the case and shattered a storefront window. Thompson, having thrown off the musician, was also advancing. They were caught in a crossfire with nowhere to run. That's when the Seattle Police mounted unit arrived. Officer Zara Johnson, riding a large bay horse named Thunder, charged directly into the melee. The horse's hooves scattered the remaining crowd and sent Kane diving for cover behind a vendor stall. Thompson tried to aim at the mounted officer, but Thunder reared up, striking out with his front hooves and forcing Thompson to retreat. Seattle Police Officer Chen shouted, "Drop your weapons!" More sirens were approaching from all directions. Kane and Thompson realized their situation was hopeless. They were surrounded by witnesses' security cameras and incoming law enforcement. Any chance of making this look like an accident was gone. But rather than surrender, Kane made a desperate decision. He grabbed a young mother who was trying to shield her toddler and pressed his gun to her head. "Back off," he shouted. "Everyone back off or she dies." The crowd froze. Officer Chen held her position, but couldn't risk a shot with the hostage so close to Kane's weapon. Michael felt helpless watching from 50 feet away as the situation spiraled out of control. But Zara was closer and she was moving. "Zara, no." Ruby called out, but it was too late. Zara walked directly toward Kane, her hands visible, her voice calm and steady. "Let her go," she said to Kane. "Take me instead." Kane's eyes darted between Zara and the approaching police officers. "Stay back, kid. I don't want to hurt you, but I will." "I know," Zara said, continuing to walk toward him with the same steady determination she'd shown at the airport. "But you don't want to hurt her either. She's just a mom trying to protect her baby." "I need leverage," Kane said, sweat beading on his forehead. "Something to get us out of here." "I'm better leverage," Zara replied logically. "I'm the witness everyone cares about. The girl who saved Michael Harrison. If you hurt a random mom, you're just another killer. But if you take me, you have something the FBI actually wants to negotiate for." Michael watched in horror as Zara approached the armed man. Every instinct screamed at him to intervene, but he could see the calculation in her eyes. The same analytical thinking she applied to engineering problems. "Zara's right," Michael called out. "Let the woman go. Take me instead." "No," Zara said firmly, not taking her eyes off Kane. "He needs someone small enough to control easily, but important enough to matter. That's me." Kane was wavering. The young mother was crying. Her toddler was screaming, and the police were getting closer. Officer Chen had dismounted and was coordinating with backup units through her radio. "What's your plan here, Kane?" Zara asked conversationally, stopping 10 feet away from him. "You can't shoot everyone. You can't outrun the police. Thompson's already surrounded. Your only chance is to surrender and hope for a plea deal." "Shut up," Kane snapped. "You don't know anything about this. I know Morrison's been arrested. I know Titan Defense is under federal investigation. I know you and Thompson were just hired muscle who got in way over your heads." Kane's grip on the young mother loosened slightly. "How do you know about Morrison?" "Because I pay attention," Zara said. "And because the FBI tells me things when I ask politely. Did you know Morrison was planning to have you killed after Michael's murder? You were loose ends just like me." Michael realized what Zara was doing. The same thing she'd done with Thompson earlier. She was giving Kane information that changed his perspective, showing him that his real enemy wasn't the people he was threatening, but the man who'd hired him. Morrison had a cleanup crew ready. Zara continued. Your bodies were supposed to be found in your apartment 3 days after Michael's accident. Carbon monoxide leak. Very tragic. Kane's face went pale. You're lying. Agent Martinez can show you the emails. Morrison never planned for you and Thompson to survive this operation. You were expendable assets. Officer Chen, recognizing what Zara was attempting, spoke into her radio. Seconds later, Agent Martinez's voice came through a police megaphone. Victor Kane, this is FBI Special Agent Patricia Martinez. Zara Johnson is telling the truth. We have documentation of Morrison's termination orders. You and Thompson were never supposed to survive this operation. Kane's hand trembled as the reality sank in. He'd been willing to commit murder for a man who was planning to murder him. Let the woman go, Kane. Zara said gently. Help us put Morrison away for good. Be the one who survives this. For a long moment, nobody moved. The entire market was silent except for the distant sirens and the soft crying of the woman Kane held hostage. Then Kane slowly released his grip and stepped back, his weapon lowering toward the ground. I want to make a deal, he said to Agent Martinez. I want to tell you everything about Morrison's operation. Officer Chen moved swiftly to escort the young mother and her child to safety, while other officers surrounded Kane. Thompson, seeing his partner surrender, threw down his rifle and raised his hands. It was over. 3 hours later, in the FBI's Seattle field office, Victor Kane sat across from Agent Martinez and Michael in a sterile interrogation room. His lawyer, an overworked public defender, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My client is prepared to cooperate fully, the lawyer said in exchange for immunity from prosecution. No immunity, Martinez replied. But cooperation will be considered during sentencing. Talk. Kane looked exhausted, defeated. The adrenaline of the chase had worn off, leaving him face to face with the reality of what he'd done. Morrison approached us 6 months ago, said he had work for experienced security contractors. What kind of work? Michael asked. Industrial sabotage originally. Corporate espionage. He wanted us to gather intelligence on Harrison Tech's defense contracts, find weaknesses in your security protocols. Martinez made notes. When did it escalate to attempted murder? 3 months ago. Morrison said the intelligence gathering wasn't enough. Titan needed Harrison completely out of the picture to secure the military contract, and you agreed to murder for money. Kane looked down at his hands. Thompson was in debt to some very bad people. Casino loans with terms that, well, let's say default wasn't an option. Morrison offered enough to clear Thompson's debts and set us both up for life. Michael felt a mixture of anger and pity. How many others have you killed for Morrison? You would have been the first. But Morrison showed us files on 3 other accidents he'd arranged through different contractors. A CEO in Denver, an engineer in Houston, a Pentagon procurement officer in D.C. All ruled mechanical failures or medical incidents. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Do you have evidence of these other killings? Morrison kept trophies. Digital files with photos, news clippings, payment records. He called it his success portfolio. Used it to convince new contractors that the work was professional and safe. Where are these files? Morrison's private server. He gave us access codes for coordination purposes. The server is hosted through a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Meridian Security Solutions. Agent Martinez exchanged glances with Michael. You're willing to provide those access codes? Everything Kane said. Server locations, encryption keys, Morrison's contact protocols. But I want protection. Once this information goes public, Morrison's cleanup crews will come for me. What cleanup crews? Kane's face went even paler. Morrison doesn't just kill targets. He eliminates everyone connected to failed operations. The contractors who missed their targets in Denver and Houston. They died in accidents within weeks of their failures. Michael felt cold dread settling in his stomach. So even if you'd succeeded in killing me, we were dead men walking the moment your helicopter landed safely, Kane confirmed. Morrison was never planning to honor our contract. We were just disposable tools. Agent Martinez stood up. I need to make some calls. Federal prosecutors will want to review your testimony before we proceed. As she left the room, Michael found himself alone with Kane and the lawyer. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Kane spoke. For what it's worth, Harrison, I never wanted to kill civilians. When I signed up for military contracting, I thought I'd be fighting enemy combatants, not murdering businessmen and children. Then why didn't you walk away? Kane's laugh was bitter. Have you ever owed money to people who collect debts with baseball bats? People who know where your sister's kids go to school? Michael realized he was looking at a man who'd been trapped by circumstances, who'd made increasingly desperate choices, trying to escape an impossible situation. It didn't excuse attempted murder, but it made Kane human rather than simply evil. The girl, Kane said quietly. Zara. She saved my life today. How? By showing me the truth about Morrison before it was too late to matter. If she hadn't made me realize I was expendable, I might have kept fighting until the police shot me dead. Michael nodded. She has a gift for seeing what others miss. She's going to change the world someday, Kane said with surprising conviction. Kids like that, they see solutions where adults only see problems. When Agent Martinez returned, she carried a laptop and a grim expression. The access codes worked. We're into Morrison's server. What did you find? Evidence of a systematic assassination program targeting defense industry executives. 17 confirmed kills over 4 years. Morrison wasn't just competing for contracts. He was eliminating competition entirely. Michael stared at the screen showing Morrison's digital trophy collection. Photos of crash sites, obituaries, financial records showing payments to various contractors. It was a catalog of murder disguised as business strategy. There's more. Martinez continued. Communications between Morrison and David Sterling, Titan's CEO. Sterling was fully aware of the assassination program. Can you prove it? Email chains discussing permanent solutions to competitive challenges. Financial transfers from Titan's black budget accounts to Morrison's shell companies. Enough evidence to bring down the entire executive team. Kane looked up from the table. There's something else you should know. Morrison has one more active contract. What do you mean? Before Thompson and I were arrested, Morrison activated a backup team. Professional killers, not corporate security contractors like us. They're targeting the girl and her grandmother. Michael's blood turned to ice. Zara and Ruby Morrison's final insurance policy. If he goes down, he wants to make sure no witnesses survive to testify against him. Agent Martinez was already reaching for her phone. How do we contact this backup team? You don't, Kane said grimly. They're ghosts. No names. No permanent addresses. No digital footprint. Morrison calls them his final solution squad. How many? 3 professionals. They were supposed to wait for our success signal. When we failed to check in, they activated automatically. Michael stood up abruptly. Where are Zara and Ruby now? Agent Martinez checked her phone. Safe house in Bellevue. Full federal protection. Not safe enough, Kane said. These aren't amateurs like Thompson and me. They're specialists in making people disappear without a trace. Michael made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week ago. I'm bringing them to the Harrison Tech building. My security, my responsibility. Michael, that's not. Agent Martinez. With respect, your safe houses have protocols, procedures, Rules that can be predicted and exploited. My building has chaos. Unpredictable security measures that change daily. And most importantly, it has me. Kane nodded approvingly. The girl was right about something else. Sometimes the best defense is doing what your enemies don't expect. As they prepared to leave the FBI office, Agent Martinez received an urgent call. She listened for 30 seconds, then hung up with a white face. "The safe house has gone dark," she said. "No communication for the past 20 minutes. Is that normal?" "No, it's never normal." Michael was already running toward the elevator, his heart pounding with terror. Somewhere in Seattle, professional killers were hunting a 12-year-old girl who had already saved his life twice. Now it was his turn to save hers. The Bellevue Safe House was a nondescript suburban home surrounded by unmarked federal vehicles. As Michael's armored SUV approached, Agent Martinez coordinated with the tactical response team through her headset. "Perimeter teams report no movement," she said. No response from interior agents. Michael studied the house through binoculars. Everything looked normal. Lawn, perfectly maintained newspapers still on the driveway, neighbors going about their evening routines. But the silence from the federal agents inside was ominous. "Let me go in first," Michael said. "If Morrison's killers are in there, they want me alive for negotiation purposes. They need leverage." "Absolutely not. You're a civilian. I'm the target they're really after. Zara and Ruby are just pressure points to get to me." Agent Martinez considered this, then spoke into her headset. "Tactical teams, hold position. We're going to try negotiation first." They approached the house openly, hands visible, no sudden movements. The front door was unlocked, never a good sign at a federal safe house. Inside, they found 2 FBI agents, unconscious but alive, professionally subdued with pressure point techniques that spoke to military training. "Where are they?" Martinez demanded, shaking one agent awake. "Basement," the agent gasped. 3 subjects, professional-grade equipment, demanded Harrison's location. Michael headed for the basement stairs before anyone could stop him. In the finished rec room below, he found a scene that made his blood boil. Zara and Ruby sat tied to chairs, unharmed, but clearly frightened. 3 men in tactical gear stood around them. Lean, efficient, deadly. The leader, a man with graying temples and cold eyes, looked up as Michael descended. "Mr. Michael Harrison," the man said with a slight accent. "Eastern European, maybe Russian. So good of you to join us." "Let them go," Michael said. "Your contract is with me." "Actually, no. Our contract is to eliminate all witnesses to Morrison's operation. But you arriving here does simplify things considerably." Ruby spoke up, her voice steady, despite the circumstances. "Michael, don't make deals with devils. These men don't honor agreements." The leader smiled. "Smart woman. She's right, of course. But we're professionals. We take pride in clean work." "What do you want?" Michael asked. "Morrison's server contains evidence that could damage many important people. We need the access codes Kane provided to your FBI friends." Zara, who had been silent until now, looked directly at the leader. "You're too late." "Excuse me. The server. It's already been downloaded by federal agencies. Copies are being distributed to prosecutors, international law enforcement, and journalists. Even if you killed everyone here, the evidence would still exist." The leader's composure slipped slightly. "You're lying. Check your phone," Zara suggested calmly. "Morrison was arrested in the Cayman Islands 2 hours ago. Titan Defense's stock price crashed 30 minutes ago when news broke. David Sterling is already negotiating surrender terms." Michael realized Zara was buying time, creating doubt in their captors' minds. But he also noticed something else. She'd been working on her restraints while talking, using techniques she'd probably learned from her father's military training stories. "The operation is over," Michael said, following Zara's lead. "Morrison can't pay you. Titan Defense is finished. There's no point in completing a contract for an organization that no longer exists. The second killer, younger and clearly more nervous, spoke up. Dimitri, maybe we should reconsider. If they're right about the evidence being distributed. Silence. Dimitri snapped. We complete contracts regardless of political complications. Even when there's no one left to pay you? Zara asked. Even when killing us makes you murder suspects instead of just contractors. The third killer, who'd been monitoring communications equipment, looked up with concern. Dimitri, I'm picking up FBI radio chatter. They know about Morrison's arrest. They know about us. Dimitri's face hardened. Then we finish this quickly and disappear. But as he raised his weapon, Zara completed her escape from the restraints and threw herself sideways, knocking over her chair and rolling behind a couch. The sudden movement startled the nervous second killer, who fired wild shots that went high. Ruby, despite being tied up, managed to kick the communications equipment off the table, destroying their ability to monitor law enforcement coordination. Michael, seeing the chaos, tackled the third killer, while Zara shouted instructions from behind the couch. Ruby, stay down! Michael, the one by the window has a knife. The basement erupted in violence. Michael, despite having no combat training, fought with the desperation of a man protecting his family. Dimitri moved towards Zara's hiding place, but she emerged from behind the couch with a heavy basement tool, a wrench she'd spotted earlier, and swung it at his knee with surprising force. Federal agents. Martinez's voice echoed from upstairs as the tactical team finally moved in. Building is surrounded. Dimitri, injured and realizing the situation was hopeless, made a final desperate attempt to grab Zara as a human shield. But Ruby, who had been quietly working on her own restraints, broke free and tackled him from behind with the fury of a grandmother protecting her child. The fight ended when the FBI tactical team stormed the basement, overwhelming the remaining killers with superior numbers and equipment. In the aftermath of Morrison's arrest and the failed assassination attempt, the scope of Titan Defense's criminal enterprise became clear. FBI raids across 3 countries uncovered evidence of systematic corporate murder spanning 4 years. Michael sat in a hospital waiting room while doctors checked Zara and Ruby for injuries. They were physically unharmed, but the psychological impact of being held hostage by professional killers was significant. 17 confirmed victims. Agent Martinez reported settling into the chair beside him. CEOs, engineers, government officials, procurement officers, anyone who stood between Titan Defense and major contracts. How did they think they could get away with it? By making it look random. Aircraft accidents, medical incidents, car crashes, spread out over time, and geography, so no pattern would be obvious. If Morrison hadn't gotten greedy and started keeping trophies, we might never have connected them. Dr. Sarah Kim emerged from the examination room. They're both fine physically, some bruising from the restraints but no serious injuries. However, I'd recommend counseling for trauma processing, especially for Zara. Michael nodded. Whatever they need. Mr. Harrison, Dr. Kim continued, that young lady has remarkable resilience. Do you know what she asked me? What? Whether the stress of being kidnapped might affect her ability to focus on her engineering studies. She's worried about falling behind in her learning. Despite everything, Michael smiled. Even after being held at gunpoint by professional killers, Zara was thinking about her future education. Agent Martinez's phone buzzed with an update. David Sterling just agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors. He's providing evidence about Titan's entire operation in exchange for a reduced sentence. What about Morrison life without parole? His digital trophy collection contained enough evidence to convict him for multiple murders. The Cayman Islands are expediting extradition. When Michael was finally allowed to see Zara and Ruby, he found them in adjoining hospital beds, holding hands across the gap between them. Ruby was telling stories about Marcus to keep Zara calm, while Zara sketched in her ever-present notebook. "How are you both doing?" "We're okay," Ruby said, though her voice carried a tremor she was trying to hide. "Scared, but okay." Zara looked up from her drawing. "Michael, did they get all of them? The bad guys, all of them? Morris and Sterling, the killers, everyone. It's over." "Good." She went back to her sketch. "I was drawing the basement layout. The FBI might want it for their investigation." Michael looked at her drawing, incredibly detailed, showing the positions of furniture equipment, even the electrical outlets and light switches. She'd memorized everything while being held hostage. "Zara, most people in that situation would be focused on being scared. How were you able to pay attention to so many details?" She shrugged. "Daddy always said that when bad things happen, the best way to stay brave is to keep your mind busy solving problems. I was figuring out escape routes and looking for weapons we could use." Ruby squeezed her granddaughter's hand. This child has her father's warrior spirit. "What happens now?" Zara asked. Michael had been thinking about that question since the FBI tactical team had secured the basement. "Now you get to go back to being a normal 12-year-old. No more hiding, no more bodyguards, no more people trying to hurt you." "But what about school? I missed almost a week." "I talked to the principal at Seattle Academy," Michael said. "They're willing to admit you mid-semester with a full scholarship. You'd be in advanced mathematics and science classes with students who share your interests." Zara's eyes widened. "Seattle Academy. That's the best private school in the state. You saved my life twice. You helped federal agents solve a murder conspiracy. You kept your grandmother safe under impossible circumstances. I think you've earned the best education available." Ruby spoke up. "Mr. Harrison, we can't accept charity. It's not charity, Mrs. Johnson. It's investment. Zara is going to change the world someday. I want to make sure she has every tool she needs to do it." As evening fell over Seattle, Michael realized that a week ago, he'd been a successful but isolated businessman. Today, he was part of a family that had chosen each other through crisis and courage. The most important contract he'd ever signed wasn't with Titan Defense or any government agency. It was the unspoken agreement to be present to listen and to protect the people who mattered most. 2 weeks after Morrison's arrest, Michael Harrison did something unprecedented. He canceled all his meetings for an entire week and flew to California to spend time with his daughter, Emma. Lisa met him at the airport in Los Angeles, her expression curious and cautious. "You look different," she said, as they drove toward her house in Santa Monica. "Different how?" "Present. Like you're actually here instead of thinking about your next meeting." Michael had spent the flight preparing for this conversation, but now that it was happening, he found himself simply telling the truth. "I met someone who reminded me what I used to care about before I got obsessed with being successful." A woman, Lisa asked with the slight smile that had first attracted him 20 years ago. "A 12-year-old girl who saved my life." He told Lisa about Zara, her courage, her intelligence, her ability to see what adults missed. He described Ruby's wisdom, the way they'd become an unexpected family during the crisis, how being around them had awakened something he'd thought was lost forever. "She sounds remarkable," Lisa said. "But Michael, what does this mean for you? For us? For Emma? It means I want to try again. Not necessarily with us. I know I hurt you too badly for that to be simple. But I want to try being the father Emma deserves." They pulled into Lisa's driveway, where Emma was waiting on the front steps, practically vibrating with excitement. At 8 years old, she was all energy and curiosity, with Michael's dark hair and Lisa's expressive eyes. "Daddy," she launched herself at him before he'd fully exited the car. "Mommy said you're staying for a whole week." "I am. No work calls, no meetings, no laptops. Just us. Really? What are we going to do? Michael knelt to her level, remembering Zara's observation about paying attention to children. What do you want to do? Everything I want to show you. My volcano project and my butterfly collection and the fort I built in the backyard and… Slow down, Michael laughed. We have a whole week. Show me the most important thing first. Emma grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the house. My room. I redesigned it using engineering principles. In Emma's bedroom, Michael found himself genuinely amazed. She'd reorganized the furniture to maximize space efficiency, created a pulley system to lift her favorite stuffed animals to a high shelf, and built a periscope from mirrors that let her see into the backyard from her desk. This is incredible engineering, he said, and meant it. Where did you learn to do this? From books, and from watching videos online, and from thinking about how things work. Michael realized his daughter had inherited his love of engineering, but nobody had been paying attention enough to nurture it. Emma, would you like to visit my company sometime? Meet the engineers who design real aircraft. Her face lit up. Could I really? We'll plan a trip to Seattle. I want you to meet Zara and her grandmother, Ruby. I think you'd all get along perfectly. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Michael and Lisa sat on the back patio with coffee, talking in a way they hadn't in years. You really are different, Lisa observed. More grounded. Less like you're always trying to prove something. Zara taught me that the most important things often come from the smallest voices. I've been listening to the wrong people for too long. What are you going to do differently? Michael considered the question seriously. Delegate more at work. Spend real time with Emma, not just expensive vacations. And he paused. I want to create something that matters beyond profit margins. Like what? A foundation. For kids like Zara, who have potential but not opportunity. I want to give them the chances I had. Lisa smiled. That sounds like the man I married. 6 months later, Michael stood in the renovated community center in Zara's neighborhood, watching as dozens of children explored the new STEM learning lab he'd funded. The Guardian Angels Foundation had officially launched with Zara as its first scholarship recipient and unofficial youth ambassador. The 3D printers are the most popular, Jennifer Walsh reported, gesturing toward a cluster of kids designing and printing small toys and tools. But the robotics station is close behind. Michael watched Zara demonstrate basic programming to a group of younger children, her natural teaching ability evident in the way she patiently answered their questions and encouraged their experiments. How many applications have we received? Michael asked. Over 3,000 in the first month, Jennifer replied. From all over the Pacific Northwest. Word is spreading fast. Ruby Johnson approached from the kitchen area where she'd been coordinating the volunteer food service that provided free meals to program participants. Mr. Michael, you need to see something. She led him to a bulletin board covered with thank you letters from parents and children. The messages were handwritten, heartfelt, and humbling. My daughter comes home excited about math for the first time ever. This program saved my son from falling behind in school. Thank you for believing in kids like mine. The waiting list is getting long, Ruby said. More centers. Michael nodded. I'm looking at locations in Tacoma, Spokane, and Portland. Eventually, I want these in every state. Emma Harrison Walsh bounded over, followed by 2 new friends she'd made during her visit to Seattle. At 9 now, she split her time between California and Seattle, thriving in both environments. Dad, can you help us with the Mars rover simulation? We're trying to program it to collect rock samples. I'll be right there. Michael turned to Ruby. How is she doing? Really? Ruby smiled. That child is becoming exactly who she was meant to be. Smart, confident, kind. You should be proud. I am. But I'm also terrified I'll mess it up again. Michael Ruby said gently. The fact that you're worried about being a good father is proof that you already are one. The man who wasn't paying attention wouldn't have that fear. Across the room, Zara was demonstrating a helicopter design simulation to a group of fascinated teenagers. At 13, she was academically ahead of most high school students, but still patient enough to help younger children with basic concepts. She's remarkable, said Dr. Patricia Chen, the MIT professor, who'd been mentoring Zara through the Foundation's Advanced Placement Program. I've recommended her for early admission to our engineering program. She's only 13, Michael protested, and academically ready for college-level coursework. But don't worry, we've designed a program that lets her advance academically while still having social connections with age-appropriate peers. Agent Martinez appeared at Michael's elbow. Sorry to interrupt, but I have news about the trials. They stepped outside where the conversation could be private. Morrison was sentenced this morning. Life without parole as expected. Sterling got 25 years. Thompson and Kane both received 15 years for their cooperation. And the other victims' families, civil settlements are proceeding. Titan's remaining assets are being distributed to victims' families. The company is finished. Michael felt closure settling over him, like a comfortable weight. Good. Has there been any retaliation attempts? Nothing. Morrison's organization was completely dependent on his leadership. Without him, it collapsed entirely. They watched through the window as Zara helped Emma and her friends troubleshoot their Mars rover program. The sight of his daughter working alongside the girl who'd saved his life felt like the completion of a circle he hadn't known he was drawing. Agent Martinez Michael said, "Would you be interested in joining the Foundation's advisory board? We could use someone with your background for our safety and security protocols." She considered the offer. What would be involved? Helping us screen volunteers developing protocols for working with at-risk youth, maybe consulting on expansion into other cities. I'd be honored. This program is exactly what a lot of these kids need. Someone who believes in their potential. As the afternoon wound down and families began collecting their children, Michael found himself standing next to Zara as she packed up the day's materials. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For saving my life. For showing me what really matters. For trusting me to help with this." Zara smiled. "Daddy always said that when good people help each other, everybody gets stronger. Your father was a wise man. Yes, he was. And I think he'd be proud of what we're building here." 15 months after the crisis that brought them together, Zara Johnson stood before the United Nations Youth Climate Summit in New York City, representing young innovators in sustainable technology. At 14, she was the youngest speaker ever invited to address the assembly. "Climate change requires aviation solutions," she said into the microphone, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had stopped Michael from boarding a sabotaged helicopter. "Aircraft contribute to carbon emissions, but they also connect communities, deliver aid, and enable scientific research. We need planes that are cleaner, not fewer planes." In the audience, Michael watched with pride as Zara presented her design for a hybrid electric aircraft system that could reduce aviation emissions by 60%. Her proposal combined artificial intelligence, advanced materials, and renewable energy in ways that had impressed MIT professors and aerospace industry veterans. "The technology exists," Zara continued. "What we need is investment in development and deployment." The Guardian Angels Foundation is launching the Green Wings Initiative to fund research by young engineers working on sustainable aviation. Ruby Johnson, sitting in the front row, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "Marcus would be so proud," she whispered to Lisa Harrison, who had flown to New York specifically to support Zara's presentation. After Zara's speech, the networking reception buzzed with excitement. Venture capitalists approached her with funding offers. University representatives discussed research opportunities, and fellow young innovators wanted to collaborate on projects. Ms. Johnson said, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, director of the MIT Climate Solutions Lab. Your presentation was extraordinary. Have you considered fast-tracking your undergraduate studies to focus on graduate-level research? I've been thinking about it, Zara replied, but I also want to keep working with younger kids through the foundation. I don't want to get so focused on advanced research that I lose touch with basic education. Michael, overhearing the conversation, felt a familiar surge of admiration for Zara's wisdom. Even as opportunities expanded around her, she remained grounded in her original mission of helping others. What if we structured a program that let you do both? Dr. Warren suggested. Graduate-level research, combined with teaching responsibilities for foundation programs. Emma Harrison Walsh, now 10, and Zara's self-appointed little sister, tugged on Zara's sleeve. Are you going to be too busy for our robotics projects? Zara knelt to Emma's level, a gesture Michael recognized as learned from Ruby's patient grandmother techniques. Emma, we're a team. Teams don't abandon each other just because opportunities get bigger. Promise. Promise. Besides, I need your help with the Green Wings project. You're better at aerodynamic simulations than half the college students I know. Emma beamed with pride, and Michael realized how much both girls had grown through their friendship. Emma had found confidence in her intellectual abilities, while Zara had learned to balance advancement with connection. Later that evening, the extended Harrison Johnson family gathered for dinner at a restaurant overlooking Central Park. The table included Michael, Lisa, Emma, Zara, Ruby, Agent Martinez, who had become Ruby's close friend, and Jennifer Walsh. I have an announcement, Michael said, raising his wine glass. The Guardian Angels Foundation has been invited to establish programs in 12 additional states. We'll be able to help over 10,000 children annually. That's wonderful, Ruby said, but don't expand so fast that you lose quality control. Wise advice, Michael replied, which is why I'm hoping you'll consider becoming the Foundation's Director of Community Relations. Ruby's eyes widened. Michael, I'm 69 years old and I never finished high school. You're 69 years old and you raised one of the most remarkable young women I've ever met. You understand what children need better than any education degree could teach. The job comes with a full benefits package, Lisa added, including health insurance and retirement planning. Michael asked me to structure the compensation. You've been planning this? Ruby accused, but her smile suggested she wasn't upset about the conspiracy. We've been hoping, Zara said. The foundation needs someone who understands what it's like to raise kids without resources. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Ruby, I've seen a lot of programs designed to help children. Most of them fail because they're created by people who've never experienced the problems they're trying to solve. This foundation works because it's grounded in real experience. As the evening progressed, Michael found himself observing the dynamics around the table. Emma and Zara discussed engineering projects with the enthusiasm of lifelong collaborators. Lisa and Jennifer compared notes on organizational development. Ruby and Agent Martinez shared stories about their respective career changes. This was what family looked like when it was chosen, rather than simply inherited. People who cared about each other's success, who listened to each other's ideas, who showed up during both crises and celebrations. Zara, Michael said, as they prepared to leave, "Do you remember what you said to me that first day at the airport?" "I said a lot of things." "You mean about the helicopter? You said they did something to it. But you were talking about more than sabotage." Zara considered this. "What do you think I meant?" "I think you meant they did something to me. Made me forget how to listen, how to pay attention, how to care about the right things." She smiled. "And now I remember." 2 years after their first meeting, Michael Harrison stood once again at Boeing Field, this time beside a brand new Harrison Tech helicopter, equipped with the most advanced safety systems his company had ever developed. The aircraft represented everything he'd learned about engineering leadership and the importance of listening to small voices. Final systems check. Complete pilot Jack Martinez reported. All green across the board. Beside Michael stood his passengers for today's inaugural flight. Zara, now 15, and preparing for early admission to MIT. Emma, 11, and excited about her first ride in her father's helicopter. Ruby, proudly wearing a Guardian Angels Foundation jacket. And Lisa, who had agreed to document the flight for the Foundation's promotional materials. "This feels familiar," Zara observed, looking around the private aviation area where their story had begun. "Different. Ending this time," Michael replied. Agent Martinez approached the group, carrying an official-looking certificate. "I have a presentation to make before you take off." She turned to Zara with formal ceremony. By order of the Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, in recognition of extraordinary courage and service to the American people, Zara Johnson is hereby awarded the FBI's Civilian Medal of Honor. The crowd of Harrison Tech employees, Foundation staff, and local media applauded as Agent Martinez pinned the medal to Zara's jacket. But Zara's attention was focused on something else, a small memorial plaque that had been installed near the helicopter pad. "In memory of Sergeant Marcus Johnson and all those who serve others before themselves," she read aloud. "Daddy would have liked that." Ruby wiped away tears. "He would have been so proud of everything you've accomplished. He would have been proud of all of us," Zara corrected, looking around at the assembled group, "for taking care of each other." As they prepared to board the helicopter, Emma hung back slightly. "Dad, are you nervous about flying again?" Michael considered the question seriously. "A little. But being nervous isn't the same as being afraid. When you're with people you trust, nervous just means you're paying attention." "Good answer," Zara said approvingly. The flight to Vancouver, the same route that would have killed Michael 2 years earlier, was smooth and beautiful. The Puget Sound sparkled below them, and the mountains rose in the distance like ancient guardians. "Look," Emma pointed out the window. "You can see the Foundation Center from here." Below them, the renovated community center, where the Guardian Angels program operated, was clearly visible, its solar panels glinting in the afternoon sun. Zara, Lisa said, filming the flight for the Foundation's documentary. "What would you tell other young people who see problems but don't think anyone will listen to them?" Zara thought for a moment. "I'd tell them that speaking up is always scary, but staying silent is scarier. And that adults aren't as smart as they pretend to be. They need kids to help them see things clearly." "What about you, Michael?" Lisa continued. "What did you learn from this experience?" Michael looked around the helicopter at his chosen family. "I learned that success without connection is just expensive loneliness, and that the most important voices are often the quietest ones." As Vancouver approached, Ruby pointed to the city skyline. "Look how far we've all come." "Distance or growth?" Zara asked. "Both," Ruby replied. "Sometimes they're the same thing." When they landed in Vancouver, Michael was greeted by representatives from the Canadian government, who were interested in licensing Harrison Tech's safety systems for their national aviation fleet. The business meeting went well, but Michael found himself distracted by watching Zara and Emma explore the airport's engineering displays. "Mr. Harrison, the Canadian Transportation Minister, said your safety systems are impressive. But what really impresses us is the story behind them. Innovation driven by human connection rather than just profit. The best engineering solves human problems," Michael replied. "It took a 12-year-old girl to remind me of that." As they prepared for the return flight to Seattle, Michael realized that the circle was complete. He'd started this journey as a successful but isolated businessman. He was ending it as a father, friend, and mentor who understood that true success was measured in lives changed rather than dollars earned. Ready to go home, he asked his passengers. Always. Zara replied, when you know what home really means. Dr. Zara Johnson, Ph.D. in aerospace engineering from MIT, at age 19, stood in the Harrison Tech Research Laboratory, putting the finishing touches on her revolutionary aircraft design. The hybrid electric propulsion system she developed during her accelerated doctoral program was about to change commercial aviation forever. The test flight is scheduled for tomorrow. Jennifer Walsh reported, reviewing the pre-flight checklist. All safety protocols cleared. Media coverage confirmed. Zara nodded, but her attention was focused on the detailed engineering schematics covering the lab walls. At 20, she was the youngest person ever to lead a major aerospace development project, but she carried the responsibility with the same calm competence she'd shown as a 12-year-old, warning a stranger about danger. Any word from Emma? Zara asked. Flight from California lands at 3. Jennifer replied. She wouldn't miss this for anything. Emma Harrison Walsh, now 16 and a senior in high school, had followed Zara's path into advanced STEM education. She was already accepted to Stanford's engineering program and spent her summers working at Harrison Tech as an intern. Michael entered the lab carrying coffee and wearing the relaxed expression of a man who had found balance between ambition and contentment. At 52, he remained CEO of Harrison Tech, but he'd restructured the company to prioritize innovation over pure profit, long-term impact over quarterly results. How are you feeling about tomorrow? He asked Zara. Confident in the engineering, nervous about the attention, she replied honestly. This isn't just about proving the technology works. It's about showing that sustainable aviation is commercially viable. The Guardian Angels Foundation has trained over 50,000 children in STEM fields, Michael said. Your aircraft design could revolutionize transportation for billions of people. I'd say the attention is justified. Ruby Johnson, now 75 and officially retired from her position as the Foundation's Director of Community Relations, entered the lab with her characteristic purposeful stride. Despite her age, she remained sharp, energetic, and fiercely protective of her extended family. Channel 7 wants an interview, she announced to Zara. I told them you'd consider it after the test flight succeeds. Not if it succeeds, Zara asked with a smile. Child, I didn't raise you to think in terms of if. Your daddy didn't think in terms of if when he walked toward that bomb in Afghanistan. The mention of Marcus Johnson still carried weight in their family conversations. His memory had become a guiding principle for everything they accomplished, a reminder to serve others before serving themselves. Lisa Harrison approached the group, followed by Agent Patricia Martinez, who had become a close family friend and now served on the boards of 3 nonprofits focused on youth development. The FAA cleared the test flight, Lisa reported. All regulatory approvals are in place. And security. Michael asked Agent Martinez. No threats detected. Harrison Tech's profile is much more positive these days. Saving the planet tends to make fewer enemies than defense contracting. The Morrison incident had become a case study in corporate corruption taught in business schools as an example of how pursuit of profit without ethics inevitably led to destruction. Titan Defense had been liquidated, its assets distributed to victims' families. Morrison had died in federal prison the previous year, his assassination network completely dismantled. There's something I want to share with all of you, Zara said, pulling out a folder marked Confidential. The initial test flights are just the beginning. Boeing wants to license the propulsion system for their next generation of commercial aircraft. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. How many aircraft? Jennifer asked. Potentially thousands. If the technology scales as projected, we could reduce global aviation emissions by 40% within a decade. Michael felt a familiar surge of pride, but also something deeper, a sense of purpose fulfilled. Zara, do you understand what this means? It means Daddy's sacrifice led to something that will help millions of people, she replied. It means everything we've built together. The foundation, the company, this family was worth it. Ruby wiped away tears. Marcus always said that when you plant seeds in good soil, you never know how tall the trees will grow. Emma burst through the lab doors, having arrived early from California. Now 16 and taller than Zara, she moved with confidence that came from growing up surrounded by people who believed in her potential. "Did I miss anything important?" she asked breathlessly. "Just planning to change the world," Zara replied, hugging her adopted little sister. "Want to help?" "Always," Emma said, studying the aircraft schematics. "But first tell me everything about the propulsion calculations." As the two young engineers dove into technical discussions, Michael found himself standing beside Ruby and Agent Martinez, watching the next generation prepare to solve problems their parents had only dreamed of addressing. "You know what the best part is," Agent Martinez observed. "What's that?" Michael asked. "This all started because a 12-year-old girl paid attention when no one else was watching. Now she's going to change the future of transportation." Ruby smiled. "Sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths." The next morning dawned clear and perfect for flying. At Boeing Field, the same location where Zara had first saved Michael's life, media crews, aviation industry representatives, and government officials gathered to witness the inaugural flight of the ZJ-1, named for Zara Johnson, the world's first commercially viable hybrid electric aircraft. "Pre-flight systems, check complete," pilot Jack Martinez reported from the cockpit, all green across the board. The aircraft itself was beautiful. Sleek lines that reduced drag, solar panels integrated into the wing surfaces, and engines that ran whisper quiet compared to traditional aviation technology. It represented 5 years of development, millions of dollars in investment, and the culmination of Zara's doctoral research. "How do you feel?" Michael asked Zara as they watched the final preparations. "Like everything we've worked for comes down to the next hour," she replied. Emma, serving as the project's documentation coordinator, carried cameras and measurement equipment. "Remember when you used to dream about working on real airplanes?" she asked Zara. "I remember when you couldn't do basic algebra." Zara shot back with a grin. "Look at us now." Ruby, wearing her best dress and the FBI medal Zara had insisted she accept as co-recipient, stood with Lisa and Agent Martinez in the VIP viewing area. "That girl's about to make history," she said proudly. "She already did," Agent Martinez replied. "This is just the latest chapter." As the ZJ-1 taxied toward the runway, Michael felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in Zara's achievement, gratitude for the family they'd built together, and hope for the future her innovations would create. "Ladies and gentlemen," the tower controller announced. "Seattle Tower clears, ZJ-1 for takeoff." The aircraft accelerated smoothly, its hybrid engines producing a fraction of the noise and emissions of conventional planes. At liftoff, a cheer went up from the crowd as Zara's design proved itself capable of sustained flight. For the next 45 minutes, the ZJ-1 performed flawlessly through a series of test maneuvers. Fuel efficiency exceeded projections. Engine performance remained optimal. The hybrid system seamlessly transitioned between electric and conventional power as designed. "This is ZJ-1," Jack Martinez reported over the radio. "All test parameters exceeded. Request permission to return for landing." "ZJ-1, you are cleared for landing. Congratulations on making history." As the aircraft touched down to thunderous applause, Zara was immediately surrounded by reporters, investors, and industry executives. But through the crowd, Michael could see her searching for familiar faces. Her chosen family, who had supported her journey from frightened child to pioneering engineer. "Dr. Johnson?" A reporter called out, "What's next for this technology?" Commercial deployment, Zara replied confidently. We're already in discussions with major airlines about retrofitting existing fleets and designing next-generation aircraft around these systems. What would you say to young people who want to follow your path? Zara paused, looking toward Ruby and Michael. I'd say that paying attention to the world around you is the first step toward changing it, and that the most important innovations come from wanting to help people, not just wanting to be successful. Any final thoughts? This aircraft exists because my father taught me to speak up when I see something wrong, because my grandmother taught me to never give up on my dreams, and because Michael Harrison taught me that engineering should serve humanity. She gestured toward the ZJ-1, now surrounded by excited engineers and government officials. But mostly it exists because we all chose to take care of each other. That's where real innovation comes from. People working together to solve problems bigger than themselves. As the crowd dispersed and the media packed up their equipment, Michael found himself once again standing with Zara, Emma, and Ruby on the tarmac where their story had begun. Full circle, he observed. No, Zara corrected, looking at the aircraft that would soon revolutionize transportation. This is just the beginning. 6 months after the successful test flight, the ZJ-1 hybrid electric propulsion system was being installed in aircraft around the world. Major airlines had placed orders for retrofit packages, while Boeing and Airbus incorporated the technology into their next-generation designs. The Guardian Angels Foundation had expanded to serve children in all 50 states and 12 countries. Emma Harrison Walsh, now a freshman at Stanford, managed the foundation's youth leadership program while pursuing her own aerospace engineering degree. Ruby Johnson had written her memoir, Raising Angels, A Grandmother's Story, which became a bestseller and inspired countless families facing adversity. The book's proceeds funded scholarships for children aging out of foster care. Agent Patricia Martinez had retired from the FBI to become the Guardian Angels Foundation's Director of Safety and Security, ensuring that the programs remained protected while serving vulnerable populations. Lisa Harrison had remarried to Michael in a small ceremony attended only by their chosen family. Their second marriage was built on the foundation of who they'd become, rather than who they'd been, and it flourished in ways their first marriage never had. Michael Harrison had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Harrison Tech to focus on innovation and mentorship. He spent 3 days a week at the company, 2 days at the foundation, and weekends with his family. A balance that would have been impossible before Zara taught him to listen to small voices. The orders keep coming, Jennifer Walsh reported during their weekly planning meeting. We're looking at potentially retrofitting 10,000 aircraft over the next 5 years. Employment impact, Michael asked. Thousands of new jobs in sustainable technology. We're partnering with community colleges to train technicians for installation and maintenance. Perfect. Make sure the Guardian Angels kids get first access to those training programs. As the meeting concluded, Michael walked through the Harrison Tech headquarters, noting how much the culture had changed. Employees were encouraged to spend time mentoring young people. Innovation was prioritized over pure profit. The company had become a model for how businesses could serve both shareholders and society. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Zara's presentation to the UN went amazing. The Secretary General wants to make her a special advisor on sustainable transportation. Michael smiled, remembering the terrified 12-year-old who had saved his life by shouting 4 words, "Don't get in the helicopter." That same girl was now advising world leaders on policies that would reshape global transportation. She'd kept her promise to Ruby. She'd become someone who helped others while staying true to her father's memory. But more importantly, she'd shown all of them that the most powerful force in the world wasn't money or technology or political influence. It was the courage to speak up when something was wrong, even when no one seemed to be listening. especially when no one seemed to be listening. Because sometimes, the smallest voices carry the most important messages. And sometimes, those messages change everything. 10 years after that fateful morning at Boeing Field, Michael Harrison stood before the United Nations General Assembly, delivering the keynote address at the Global Climate Solutions Summit. Behind him, a massive screen displayed images of aircraft using Zara's propulsion technology, reducing emissions while connecting communities around the world. A decade ago, he began, "I thought success meant building the biggest company, making the most money, having the most influence. I was wrong." In the audience, Zara now, Dr. Zara Johnson, director of the UN's Sustainable Transportation Initiative, sat with Ruby, Emma, Lisa, and Agent Martinez. Their chosen family had gathered to witness this moment when their story came full circle. "Success isn't measured in dollars or market share," Michael continued. "It's measured in lives, changed, problems solved, and voices heard. 10 years ago, a 12-year-old girl saved my life by speaking up when she saw danger. Today, her innovations are saving our planet by providing clean alternatives to fossil fuel transportation." The assembly erupted in applause, but Michael's eyes were fixed on his family in the front row. The Guardian Angels Foundation has now served over 1 million children worldwide. These young people are becoming engineers, doctors, teachers, and innovators. They're solving problems we didn't even know existed, creating solutions we couldn't have imagined. He paused, looking directly at Zara. "But the most important lesson I've learned is this. The future belongs to those who listen to small voices, who pay attention to details others miss, who have the courage to speak truth to power." Today, I'm announcing the Global Young Innovators Initiative, a partnership between the Harrison Tech Foundation, the United Nations, and educational institutions worldwide. This program will identify and support young people who are developing solutions to humanity's greatest challenges. Emma Now, a sophomore at Stanford studying sustainable engineering, wiped away tears as she watched her father, the man who had once been too busy to attend her school plays, dedicate his life's work to helping other children achieve their potential. The funding for this initiative comes from a simple principle. When you invest in young people, they invest in everyone else. When you listen to small voices, they often have the biggest things to say. As Michael concluded his speech, the assembly rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. But he barely noticed the applause. He was focused on Ruby, who was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. After the ceremony, the family gathered for dinner at a restaurant overlooking the East River. The conversation flowed easily between technical discussions of new innovations, updates on foundation programs, and gentle teasing about old memories. "Marcus would be so proud," Ruby said quietly, looking around the table at the family they'd built together. "All of us." "He is proud," Zara replied. "I can feel it every time we help another child, every time we solve a problem, every time we choose to take care of each other." Michael raised his wine glass. "To small voices and big changes, to families we choose, and futures we build together. And to a 12-year-old girl who taught a billionaire that the most important question isn't, how much can I make, but how much can I help? To second chances," Lisa added. "To paying attention," Emma said. "To speaking up," Zara contributed. "To never giving up," Ruby concluded. As the sun set over New York City, casting golden light through the restaurant windows, Michael realized that his true success hadn't come from building a company or making money or winning contracts. It had come from learning to listen, from choosing connection over isolation, from understanding that the most powerful force in the universe was people taking care of each other. And it had all started with 4 words shouted across a tarmac. "Don't get in the helicopter. Sometimes the smallest warnings carry the biggest truths. Sometimes the youngest voices have the most important messages. And sometimes, when we finally learn to listen, we discover that saving others is the only way to save ourselves. If this story moved you like this video, to honor the brave young voices in your own community, share this story to spread the message that every child's voice matters. Comment below about a time when a young person taught you something important, or when you spoke up despite being afraid no one would listen. Subscribe for more stories that celebrate courage, connection, and the power of paying attention to the people around us. Remember, in a world full of noise, the most important messages often come from the quietest voices. Your job is to listen. Their job is to change the world. And sometimes, both happen at exactly the same time. What small voice will you listen to today